Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Saturday. It is 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today, I have a very special guest for you. It's a last minute guest. He stepped in like a champ to help me out today, and he's got a wealth of knowledge in an area that I do not. So let's go ahead and bring Fahad over. He runs KG Foods, formerly known as Keto Geek Foods. So let's go ahead and bring him over. We'll have a good time talking with him and pick his brain a little bit. Welcome, Fahad. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, hello. How's it going?
It's doing wonderful, wonderful. You're up early. Thank you. It's 6 a.m. where you are, up in lovely, lovely California, up where the grapes are.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. California is awesome. It's raining these days, but I think California always needs a little bit more water at the start of the year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Um, I've only been to California one time. I was like 27 years old back in like 2006, but we didn't make it up to Napa. We just were in Los Angeles and San Francisco. But thank you again. I wanted to start off with the discussion. I wanted to kind of get an idea, and for the people watching here, what drew you to keto? Because I don't think you ever had any like weight issues or anything like that. So definitely a different side of things than myself.
Oh, yeah. So the story began all the way in 2017, 18, roughly. And I was on my other car business, and I was listening to this podcast by Tim Ferriss, and he had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, as a lot of people in keto know who he is. And he was on the show, and he was talking about therapeutic and potentially really awesome health benefits to ketogenic diets and its applications in things like cancer, diabetes, and all of that kind of stuff. And I got really intrigued by it. I personally, like you mentioned, didn't have any weight issues, but I thought that for the long haul, this might be a great protocol or a diet to follow. And it could, and a lot of the things that I noticed about the diet were all about saving time because fat is such a compressed form of energy. You need less weight to carry while you're out and about and doing your work. And a lot of the times, people also noticed that their hunger levels were dropping because of a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet. I was really intrigued by that. For example, I tried once upon a time the Soylent experiment. A lot of people know what Soylent is. It's like the high carb drink, and you can just chug that along. The problem with that was that I was feeling hungry every 2 to 3 hours. So having less appetite, more hunger control was one of the drawing factors towards the ketogenic diet. And then there were other practical benefits. For example, I wouldn't have to go to in the middle of the day to a fast food joint or a restaurant, which would take about 15 to 20 minutes to drive to a certain place, then 15 to 20 minutes or maybe half an hour to eat at that place, and then 15 to 20 minutes to come back to where you're working. So that would take about an hour. But in when I was in like a ketogenic diet, I noticed that because the hunger levels were low and the foods were more efficient, I was saving an hour per day during my 10 to 12 hour work days. So my approach to ketogenic diet were more about practical points and sustainability. So after the podcast, I decided to make a snack for myself. Those were these tiny little cups that we had. Those were like the 2 ounce. At that time, we didn't even call them energy pods. And so I made those products and I brought them to my local yoga studio in the morning, and people loved them. Initially, interestingly enough, we wanted to create a bar out of the product, but uh, the bar would melt because of the high fat content and the fact that we were using things like MCT oil. Anybody who's worked with MCT oil and some of these fats, they would know that it's kind of hard to create a solid out of it because everything just melts away. So we created this sort of semi-solid concoction, brought it over to the gals at the yoga studio. They immediately loved it, and they said, just run with it. Don't even worry about the bar. So we created the energy pods, and now they are here. So that was my initial exposure towards the ketogenic diet. We also had a podcast eventually that some of the people here might be familiar with. And the reason why we started that podcast was because we wanted to share the knowledge with everybody. We wanted to help everybody. The car business that I had, it wasn't as fulfilling. Making money and being a successful business person is one thing, but helping humanity, I think, is one of the driving factors. It's more fun for me. So that's how I got introduced into the ketogenic diet and started the business, the food product, the podcast. And I just wanted to give back to the community and see other people become happier, healthier, and do the best I can.
Because I remember when like you started putting the teasers out for Keto Geek and like the podcast and such, and I was super excited because I'd only been in keto for about a year or so, give or take, and there was not a lot of new things coming out at the time. I mean, it's since exploded. So I mean, now I mean at the time there weren't hardly any products on the mainstream market. You couldn't go to the grocery store and find anything keto branded, where now you can go and find things on just about every aisle that has something keto related or whatever. But at the time, and I remember when you were like trying to come up with a name for the energy pods, and we were talking about that. Um, and your podcast, I was actually, if I'm not mistaken, I was on episode 39. I think I was 39 years old at the time too. So, so as you were saying with the reasoning behind jumping on board with the ketogenic diet and finding that you liked it because it was saving you time, that's one of the major benefits for me. Is it's outside of the weight loss, outside of the ability to help me control food control with like food addiction issues that I have. I have never been in in a situation before where it's 7, 8 o'clock at night and I'm like, oh, I should probably eat. I'll have my coffee typically in the morning, and then I'll make breakfast for our granddaughter, and I'm do stuff around the house and do YouTube stuff, and then I'll be like, oh, I should maybe probably eat something. And I've never had that in my life. So it's a fascinating thing that you bring that up, because I don't think that that's even something that a lot of people think about. And as one reason I think I was successful in the beginning stages is I didn't have to meal prep. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people put a lot of stock and a lot of effort into meal prepping, but that was never something that I was into. So I didn't have to bring a lunch to work. I would just come home and have my one meal, or open my eating window when I got home from work for about 2 hours or whatever it was at the time. So I think that that's a huge understated fact about the ketogenic lifestyle, is that hunger control. You're not beholden to the fast food. You're not beholden to potato chips and all those things. So
And yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit over here. The one of the key sort of gravitational aspect towards the ketogenic diet, which many people might also relate with among your listeners and myself as well, was that it was a very sort of scientific approach towards nutrition and health. Like for example, you come across a lot of nutrition spheres where a lot of the times the discussion is more about let's eat specific foods, let's do this, let's do that. But within the keto community, it was all about, hey, what would happen to the body if you them through a state of ketosis? What if we quantify things? What if we measure glucose levels? What if we measure ketone levels? What if we measure these kind of things? So it was a very awesome, and still is a very awesome way to sort of use a quantitative approach towards diet rather than a qualitative way to approach diet, if that makes sense.
oh yeah, of course. I mean, and it's weird because we will see a lot of like science in the food sphere these days, but I think a lot of it gets jumbled up with ethics. There'll be a lot more ethical things with food, like, oh, you shouldn't eat meat versus, well, and the science would back, why would you not, or, why would you shy away from the more nutrient dense foods and such in lieu of monocrop stuff like that. But now, one thing that I have questions. So you started developing the energy pod, which for people who are not familiar with what an energy pod is, it is a ridiculously delicious little cup of chocolate. Now it's more than just chocolate, because I believe it's got protein powder in it. It's got MCTs in it. It's got like a very high grade of chocolate, and it's like processed for like 72 hours. I think I even made a video a couple of years ago about it, and tried to put in some footage of just the process that these go through. And one of the things that I did talk about with the people was they are pricey, um, dependent on your level of income, but they're so very delicious. And we just recently did a review of your Coco Zen, which is sort of like a scaled back but a larger container version of those. And yeah, so I just wanted to kind of get people up to speed on what an energy pod is, and you can probably elaborate a little bit better with what the ingredients are and what it takes to manufacture those.
That's an interesting question. Energy pods, though they started off initially with the concept of the bars, as I was talking about, you might remember that our first versions, in fact, some of the people who have purchased or tried our product in the keto and low carb community might have noticed that they were very grainy at the start.
Hmm.
And then we started to implement chocolate making grinders into our processing. And so anybody who's sort of seen how chocolate is made, normally your particle size of your almonds or your cocoa nibs, they have to be reduced to about 20 microns. That's where your tongue stops detecting particles. So that's why every good or high quality chocolate is going to be silky, smooth, and just melt in your mouth. You don't perceive it as solid at that point. So when we applied those grinding methods into the energy pods, we just noticed like, wow, holy moly, the product just went to an insane level of taste and texture back in about 2021. That's when we started to use these processes. And what really started to validate us was when we started taking our products into culinary events. We took our sort of product to events like Taste of Napa. One of her friends, she used to work at a 3-star Michelin restaurant here at the French Laundry. She tried the product. Some of the winemakers here in Napa Valley, they tried the product, and they've slowly but surely adopted the product into their life. They're regular buyers as well. So that was a really interesting moment for not just us, but for the keto and low carb community, because we created a unique product that is hitting the nutrition and health sphere, but at the same time also appeasing the culinary and the sort of the chefs and all those kind of people as well. So we were really happy about how the progress went, and since then we've just been experimenting with different things. We go toe to toe with sugary products, like sugary chocolate based products, and our product just knocks them out of the park. In fact, one time we took our highest tier chocolate, Chocolate Nova, which is out of stock at the moment, and we took it to downtown Napa, and we brought in the quote unquote French Laundry's chocolate bars. So those chocolate bars are like $15 a pop, and our Chocolate Nova is $9.95. So we were like, we're going to compete against that kind of bar. And we brought it to downtown Napa at a car show. We had people sort of try the chocolate bar, the $15 bar, and then we had people try our Chocolate Nova. And 100% of the people were like, wow, this is way better than the $15 chocolate bar. At that point, we realized, oh my God, we have something really special and really tasty, but at the same time, exceptionally nutritious. But the challenge we faced was that my goal is to make healthy more affordable and accessible for everybody. And I think we all share this goal because there's enough luxuries in the world. But if we truly want to make a difference in the world, we have to make it more available for around people that are around us. So initially, because like you mentioned, our product was taking about 72 hours to make, we really started to do some different kinds of experiments, like pre-grinding before we entered into the refining phase of reducing the particle size. I hope I'm not losing everybody here. Um, and then the texture just and the process became way more streamlined, and we were able to bring the price, which went up to $7.95 a pod, to about $3.99, which it is right now for our chocolate flavor. And over time, hopefully, as we grow up and scale up our business, my goal is to perhaps even reduce the price. And it's interesting because this entire time we had COVID. With this entire time we had inflation, mass inflation, and a lot of businesses were increasing their price. We basically halved our price during that period of time because we really do care about the people and we want the product to be more accessible. So that's been the sort of challenge over here, and we're quite happy about it.
And Danny, one of the people in our chat here, has brought up a good. He's basically something he's saying that the problem with good keto products is the price. So there's going to be a couple of factors when it comes to keto products. One, ingredients matter to where a lot of times we're seeing not so great products with still a high price, and then we're seeing a lot better ingredients with a hefty price. And understanding, and I imagine that you could probably touch on this as well, that when you're dealing with the higher ingredients, the higher end ingredients, or just the ingredients that the ketogenic community are actually looking for, is going to cost money. And then you're dealing with the scale, because you're such a small company. You're not competing with my phone was ringing. I'm sorry. You can't compete with Hershey and all that, because they can do whatever, and they can bring the price way, way down. You are, like you just said, are in a very particular spot where even though other products are raising their prices, you're still finding ways to bring them down, because the more you can do that, the better the better you're going to be able to infiltrate the market. But and like I said in our review of the Coco Zen, at $10, it's like $10.95 a jar. Unless you use the 10% discount that I have. I'm an affiliate, so just full disclosure, I'm an affiliate with KG Foods. Um, that's actually a significantly good price compared to what I've seen even in stores. We were looking at a similar product at a Fresh Time Market yesterday, and they wanted $9 or $10 in the store for something that had a lot of sugar in it and didn't have probably the you know the the love, if you will, going into it. So yeah.
Yeah, I can actually further elaborate on the topic of why keto products are far more expensive as well, through like from a supply chain and e-commerce perspective, because we have a good insight on all of those things. But you're right in first of all, you're right in the sense that we were doing a demo yesterday at a local store here up in north of California, and I noticed that a lot of sugary products are insanely priced. Like some of them are like
Oh,
reaching 19.95, $20 for a jar. Oh my God. Um, the Kokozen is in a very interesting spot. It's not exactly a spread, but it's not exactly a sauce either. It's a sort of like a so one store has it next to the spreads, and then another store has it next to like gourmet sauces, which is really interesting because of the texture. You might have noticed it's silky smooth. A lot of
mhm.
spreads have like a grainy texture to them, unless it's like one of the big foods, such as like a Skippy or Jif or one of those kind of
Like
manufacturers.
Nutella's a very smooth from what I remember, but I haven't had that in many, many years. So
Nutella, I would say, is more on the sauce side, and the reason why is it's because the first ingredient is sugar. And
yeah.
so once you start getting to first ingredient being a certain nut, then you start moving into the spread sort of market. So we're sort of like in the middle of this with Coco Zen, which is really interesting. And then at the same time, because of whey protein and no sugar, then the store owners are like, okay, that's also a health product. What do we do with it? So it becomes an interesting sort of challenge for us to figure out where to put the product. And so a lot of the times we end up putting the product in both places and testing to see where it converts to a sale and where consumers will find it more meaningful. So energy pods have the same challenge for us, because one store has it at a grab and go salad bar, another one has it at a checkout. One place has it next to the power bars and all of that kind of stuff. Our local gym has it next behind the counter. So there's these different experimentations that are happening because of the fact that our food product is so unique in its form factor. Both of them, the energy pods more so. And a lot of the times when we talk to distributors, some of the big distributors within the sphere, like US Foods or Kihi, or these names might not be familiar to a lot of people, but these are the back end distributors that are working to take the product from the manufacturer and they trickle down into your local stores. So even they can have issues sort of pinpointing where the product's going to go. So we're overcoming that challenge right now, and I think that the precise location for our energy bot specifically is going to be right at the checkout counter. Now, going back to the sort of keto products being more expensive, whenever you look at a food product, it depends. Like some food products are based on volume based. Like for example, your Hershey bars are volume based products and impulse buys. So they may not be making as much profit per se, but because they sell so much that they're going to eventually make a lot of profit. Some of your gourmet products are value based sort of products where they'll sell at a higher price point, but they'll make more margins for the less sales that they're getting. So these are the two basic models that happen in your supply chain. Keto products already start off with very expensive ingredients. Once you replace flour, just your basic flour with almond flour, you've already taken your main goods, and instead of paying cents on the pound, you're now paying dollars on the pound. Sugar is the same way. Sugar's cents on the pounds. Allulose or erythritol is dollars on the pound. Milk powder, cents on the pound. Whey protein isolate, dollars on the pound. MCT oil versus your vegetable oil, cents, dollars. So everything is being sort of increased in price when it comes to your base cost of goods. Next, you have to pay, in order for your product to actually be practical, you have to start entering your supply chain. E-commerce is great, but then you're paying a lot of shipping and all that kind of stuff. But let's go back to like our regular supply chain. So there you have to pay the broker. The brokers will take 5 to 10% cut from whatever your cost of goods are. I'm starting to get into real deep economics here, but let's go with it. And then after the broker, you have to pay your distributor, and that's marked up further, 50, 60%. Then you have to pay the retailer because they have their space, and you have to sort of they have to sell your product, so they're gonna take like 40 to 60% on top of that. So once you start adding this, a product that might cost like $1 to make is gonna end up being $4. This changes when you move from a value to volume-based pricing, like your Hershey's bars and stuff like that, because they're happy to take that little bit of cut, but they're selling so much. Another example would be bottled water, because they're selling so much of it that it doesn't really, they can take a little bit of cuts in their profits. So that's how the supply chain works. Now, as far as e-commerce is concerned, that's a different sort of monster in itself. When we started in the keto movement started and really started becoming popular in 2017, 18, 19, like those were the 3 golden years of the keto boom, as I would call it. Facebook market ads, influencer marketing, all those kind of things that you see out there were really sort of effective. But as the e-commerce boom also simultaneously increased, your ad spends, your markets, and all those kind of things just went higher and higher and became more expensive as well. So it's really challenging for a lot of new businesses to hit their consumers when it comes to pricing. So all of this is sort of to explain that over time, not only are keto and low carb products going to be by default a little bit pricier, but because of how the market is moving in general, you're going to notice that the prices are going to go slightly up as well. So long-winded answer.
Oh yeah, but I mean it's totally fascinating because I think a lot of us on our side, so a lot of us on the consumer side, we just get the sticker shock. So like you say like Quest products or something like Quest will put out a cracker, they have a product that is like a Cheez-It, but you're getting 4 little packages, like 4 1-ounce packages of their Cheez-Its or whatever, and it's $10 for a box of that. Versus you get a 24-ounce box of Cheez-Its for $4. So you're getting 4 ounces of these Quest for 10 or 24 for 4. You know, like there's that sticker shock, and you're like, but why does it have to be that way? And a lot of people, 99% of the average consumer, regardless of their in the keto sphere or whatever, they don't care about the supply chain. They don't care about the cost of ingredients. They care about the ingredients. They care about the quality of the ingredients. but they don't always necessarily want to cover the cost of that. And it's like, why is it so expensive? And we see that. And that's one thing that Shander and I have always tried to address when we do our review videos is to do our review videos. Most of the time, we are purchasing the products that we're reviewing out of pocket. Now, some of the products that get sent to us, by companies, hey, do you want to try this? And if it looks compelling, we'll say yes. But a lot of times it's just us at the grocery store, seeing it, putting it in the cart, coming home, turning the camera on. What do we think of this? Should you buy it? Should you not buy it? Because we kind of represent that average consumer, because a lot of times people are going to see these things just like we do and decide, should we buy this? Do the ingredients line up? And so a lot of people just don't understand. And it's always good sometimes to sit down with someone like you. And I plan to have Chris Bear on sometime, hopefully, because he has another, he does, for people who don't know Chris Bear, he does Keto Chow. And that's a whole other thing with him as well. But so many weird things when it comes to putting a ketogenic product to the market. What was, if you would want to share some of maybe the strangest things that you've come across that you had no idea about, like some of like the weirder side of things? Like you told me something in a text yesterday or the day before that stuff with allulose can't go to Whole Foods. Whole Foods doesn't want allulose.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's really interesting how each supply chain, not supply chain, but each big store has their own quirks. So, for example, Whole Foods does not want allulose in their product. I think there are some stores that don't want, like REI is a big one. I don't think they want any sort of sweeteners. They'll take sugar any day over any sort of sweetener. And so you have to sort of factor those things into your business model as well. It's like, what kind of store are you going to target in the long run? Um, so these are some interesting things that we've noticed. There's a lot of dogma. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of ignorance on this topic. I think that's the sort of approach I try to take, is like assume ignorance before any sort of malice. So yeah, it's challenging. The stores that actually really easily accept your product with any sort of sweeteners would be Walmart's cool with it. I think your Amazon's, of course, cool with it. Trader Joe's has its own quirks as well. So it's really interesting, and that's exactly why we created CocoZen, was because we wanted to create a larger size of the energy pods in a for sort of spread form, and then at the same time aim for Whole Foods. And we've had some backdoor conversations with some of these stores as well to only find out that, hey, okay, yeah, there's issues. Some stores are going to have issues with certain gums and binders they don't want in their product, and that's been a challenge as well. So most health stores are not going to take any sort of artificial sweeteners or artificial binders of any sort, which is why sometimes you're going to notice that you were talking about organic Cheetos at Whole Foods, I think, right?
What was yeah. So a lot of I've noticed a lot of the companies like Doritos and Cheetos and stuff, they've started putting out organic lines so they can get into health food stores. Like Whole Foods, I've seen like them and Fresh Time. Well, Fresh Time is kind of a anomaly here in the Midwest. It started out as more of a health food place, but then over the pandemic, Meyer bought it, which is a big grocery chain in the Midwest. So then now you go and they have the normal cereals, some, and they have the normal sodas where they didn't carry regular Coke and Diet Coke and such in the beginning. Um, so that's something that I've noticed, because Whole Foods is a drive for us. So we don't have a Whole Foods nearby. It's about a 35-minute drive for us. Same thing with Trader Joe's. Like I have to make a day to go to Trader Joe's. We've got all these 3 or 4 of them within 10 minutes of me, but no Trader Joe's over here. But I've just noticed like it's so strange because you talk about how they won't want certain kind of artificial sweeteners, and you talk about you have to kind of chalk things up to ignorance over malice. But I see so many weird marketing things these days where you see zero sugar, zero added sugar, but then you look at it and they've got dates or and the weird thing that I found out the other day, kind of asking this and along the lines of for some reason, and I haven't been able to find out an answer, it's illegal for any company that utilizes a meat product like beef jerky, beef sticks, anything like that to use an artificial sweetener. So even with like Jack Link's or Walmart's own, like Walmart has a zero sugar beef jerky. Jack Link's uses a pineapple powder, which for all intents and purposes is a sugar because pineapple is super sweet. Same thing with, and then the Walmart is using like a pineapple juice.
Yeah.
So no added sugars, sugar free. But then you have to look at the ingredients and go, how can they do that? Or like the coffee mate liquid coffee creamers, they'll say zero sugar, but then the second ingredient after water is corn syrup.
Yeah.
And
All
I
right.
know, that it comes down to like probably the amount, and it's under a certain gram per serving or whatever. But it's still it just seems so deceptive.
Yeah. All right. Quick trivia question. What do you think is the common source of table sugar in the US market? Where does it come from?
Beets?
Bingo. And beet is a tuber.
Yeah.
And in the sort of like the carby community, like potatoes and beet and sort of tubers are considered like they have a health halo around them.
Yeah.
So that just goes to show that source is not quite important. The way you process it, the way you bring it integrate it into the food product and how it impacts the body, at least in my humble opinion, I think that's where the problems start to arise as well. So like, for example, people would pay extra for organic coconut sugar or any of these fruit sugars. But at the end of the day, if they have the same glycemic response, if they have the same way they basically one-to-one substitute with cane sugar, I don't personally see how that would be a substantial difference, especially since we know that the chemical composition of these sugars are very similar. Like fructose or high fructose corn syrup or table sugar, they might be just like 5 to 10% different in the amount of certain compositions of sugars, but otherwise they're very similar. And so I find it hard to think, like for example, honey is also another one where it's very chemically similar to high fructose corn syrup, but it has trace amounts of stuff in it or nutrients perhaps that may uh, give it its health halo. Same
Yeah.
with and yeah, you should check out invert syrup, high fructose corn syrup, and honey, and just look at their fructose, uh, sucrose sort of composition and see what the craziness is over there. Um, so it's sort of hard for us as a food company to sort of conceive how that's making such a big difference, but consumers are the ones who eventually get to decide, hey, this is what I'm going to buy and not going to buy. And perhaps this could be a perfect segue into our types of keto sweeteners as well and how people can use them if you want to talk about that one.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. I was going to say that when we reviewed the Cocoa Zen, it has erythritol in it, which can have a cooling effect to certain people. And we were wondering, we had talked about in the video, would it be possible to switch that out with allulose? And we thought, and one of the things that we mentioned in our review was we thought that the product was a little too sweet, which kind of goes against something that I would ever think I would say about a product, right? But we were not critical of the product by any stretch of the imagination. But I mean, I just put an order in for 5 more jars the other day. Stuff is Chandra loves it, and
Yeah.
things that Chandra loves and keeps Chandra happy stay in the house. So, they say
I'm
happy wife,
humbled.
happy life. And so, it was just, it was like minor tweaks for us. Like we were talking and you said you tried working with allulose and kind of give us an idea of, because you're utilizing erythritol, but you've also kind of touched on the idea of allulose and how there's some shortcomings with that with markets and what. So yeah.
Yeah, so our go-to sweetener right now is erythritol, and the reason why we stuck with erythritol was more from a scientific perspective, and also from like the cost perspective. Cost because yeah, allulose is a new sweetener, and erythritol has been sort of tested for a while. It's popular even in the Japanese markets as well. Um, and the scientific perspective, we noticed when we looked at studies that were conducted in comparing, not comparing, but sort of evaluating the gastric tolerance. Like stomach tolerance is a huge issue with any sort of non-nutritive sweetener. And we noticed was that erythritol has nearly about 2x the stomach tolerance compared to allulose. So you can eat a lot more erythritol in a day compared to allulose and not have gastric issues or stomach issues. Um, in our experiment with allulose versus the erythritol for our energy pod formulation, we noticed that allulose, at least the brand we used, I'm not sure if I should name drop it, but it was a generic over-the-counter brand that we tried. And it was not sweet at the small particle size. And erythritol seems to perform really well. I'm not sure what the science is, but it was far sweeter. Far
Well,
sweeter.
I think it's a known thing that allulose in of itself is 70% as sweet as sucrose.
Yeah.
So
We
because
did a
basically that's how sweeteners are kind of judged, right?
yeah,
How sweet are they compared to basically table sugar,
yeah.
right? So
I
you've got like allulose is 70% as sweet, and then something like sucralose is like 1,000 times sweeter, or
yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah. So what we did was a one-to-one substitution of
Right.
gram for gram erythritol versus allulose, and this is what we noticed in that specific brand that we had to use. We actually ended up adding table sugar, lots of it, to make up for the low sweetness that we got from allulose. Now, I don't know why that was the case. Maybe there's a better brand out there, but the cooling effect definitely gets slightly reduced. But one thing we also notice is that when you start reducing the particle size of your erythritol granules, the cooling effect also starts going down. So our energy pods are less than when you have it in certain baked goods. It's also one thing we noticed. But a lot of the time, some culinary people in our sort of events that we go to, they do notice the cooling effect, and they're like, "What's this?" But it's usually not an issue. First of all, people are just blown away by how explosive the flavor is. Um, so we might continue doing some more experiments on it, see what we can come up with. Maybe we just got a brand that wasn't as expressive in its sweetness. And the reason why we went with higher sweetness for cocos, and that was very purposeful actually, was because we want to bring that product into Whole Foods or any of these kind of health stores. And when we're in these stores, you're competing against some of the products that are exceptionally sweet, like really, really sweet. Like we're competing against Nutella, for example, where the first ingredient is straight up sugar. So in order to sort of cater to that palate, that target demographic, we are forced to increase the sweetness and adapt accordingly because most consumers, or many consumers, if not most consumers, do prefer or have a certain set palate. They don't know what a keto is. They don't know what sort of stuff it is in the market. They usually go for what's tasty, and that's what they use it to buy. So that's what we were sort of aiming for. With our energy pods, the sweetness is slightly lower. And that's also because we wanted a more chocolatey flavor and not just be a sweetener bomb. Another thing to sort of mention over here, we were talking about the gastric or stomach tolerance of uh, various kinds of sweeteners. And so the truth of the matter is, just to sort of segue a little bit further and delve into it, is that every single sweetener is going to have a certain threshold. that people can tolerate per day. Um, so you have two different kinds of sweeteners. One is your sort of like low weight sweeteners, like what's it, sucralose, monk fruit extract, stevia. Like these are very potent concentrated sweeteners that are considered 20, not 20, but 200 to 300 times sweeter than your average sugar. And then within those, like for example, monk fruit has different kinds of levels. Some of you might have noticed as well. Monk fruit has the 5% mager side, or 25% and 80%. Like these are three different, and 50%. These are like 3 to 4 different kinds of variations that you're going to find in the market, and each of them just shows how concentrated the sweetener is. Personally, I think 25% for monk fruit is a great option for most people, but you start paying a lot more after that point. It becomes a little bit more expensive. So every sweetener is going to have a tolerance threshold, but your low weight ones are going to have a slower one because they don't have a higher impact on your stomach. But when you get into stuff like xylitol, you start getting into erythritol, you start getting into allulose. So these are your bulking sweeteners. They're going to have a lower threshold. So you're going to have more gastric issues at like certain grams per day. And it also depends on how many grams you're consuming in one sitting. So if you're going to consume 10 to 15 grams of a certain sweetener, it's going to have a more impact rather than 10 to 15 grams throughout the entire day. And there's also an important factor here that sometimes your product is going to come with certain fibers, and those are going to either complement or make things worse for you, because those fibers have their own sort of threshold. So you have to be wary of what kind of product it is, what kind of fiber it is, what their threshold tolerances are for you. And that allows you to have less stomach issues with non-nutritive sweeteners, because that's a common issue in the keto sphere or in any health sphere where people may have stomach problems consuming lots of sweeteners.
Gastrointestinal distress, those type of things where, because we are familiar with the original like sugar-free candies that were on the market pre-keto, and the ones that are still available and just about everywhere, the Hershey's, like the Hershey's, the Reese's, all of these that are zero sugar, that are predominantly maltitol, sorbitol, and all of those. And you have, like, I'm very sensitive to those. Like, we've done reviews of those, and I've had like a bite, and it's impacted me severely. Where, same thing with like the Albanese gummy bears. If you can see the very colorful reviews on Amazon about those things. You know what I mean? Like, Chandra knows, like, she can have 5 Albanese sugar-free gummy bears before she starts seeing any ill effects. 5 gummy bears, that takes some control, right? Because who's ever just eaten 5 gummy bears? Unless you only have 5 gummy bears, unless they're California gummy bears. But but yeah, like, and I kind of want to see like what would be, so like you were saying that health food stores don't want artificial sweeteners, and I think a lot of non-sugar sweeteners get lumped into the artificial status. So which sweeteners which ones are considered artificial and which ones are not? Because I think there's a question there with like aspartame, allulose, sucralose, stevia, xylitol. Like, I think people lump all of these names in with artificial sweeteners versus sugar being natural. But are you familiar with which ones are considered artificial and which ones are not?
Yeah, we did actually I did a small podcast episode on our newer podcast called Energize, Explore, Enjoy. I did an episode on that one, talking about different kinds of sweeteners, their history, and what they're all about. But it's a bit of a wreck at this moment. Natural sweeteners, of course, like you've mentioned, basically the main artificial sweeteners just
Right.
about now, like Ace K and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
So the natural sweeteners would be considered monk fruit extract, stevia, and then erythritol is considered natural, xylitol is considered natural. But then again, you ask someone from a different big business, and they might say that that same sweetener is artificial at that point. So it's all over the place when it comes to definition. My way to vet it out for just for personal purposes would be look up whatever the chemical is and see if it's found in fruits and vegetables, or it's consumed by us on a daily basis or regularly, or is it's part of a food that we're already eating, basically. And if the answer is yes, then that will be considered a natural sweetener. Now, if it is not part of that equation and it is produced by a chemical process and is not something that exists in foods that we're already eating, then I would consider that to be an artificial sweetener. Next thing I would say is look at the FDA website. Perhaps that might give you insight on the kind of studies they've conducted on that sort of sweetener before it enters into the U.S. food supply chain. That gives a good idea. Then you can perhaps, if you want to go even more hardcore, you can look up different studies as well and see what kind of tolerances each of these sweeteners have in a human being. A lot of the times that data is available. And that gives you a pretty decent idea of how a certain sweetener, whether it's artificial or it's natural, is going to have an influence on your gastric system. And then what you could do is find something that you like and fits the kind of diet you're trying to formulate here, and individually test that sweetener, see how much you can tolerate in a certain threshold. Like, for example, mix it with water or your morning coffee and see if you can tolerate 10, 15 grams of whatever you're consuming or whatever works for you. And then you'll have a good idea of whether the issue is with the sweetener. And a lot of the times there's issues with the fibers that comes with some of the sweeteners. Like a lot of the candy bars or Linden nutrition bars, they not only have the sweetener, but they also have these soluble corn fiber or something on those lines. And those fibers can sort of make things a lot more worse. But you're right that certain sweeteners like sorbitol and maltitol are more problematic than xylitol. And then last of the equation comes erythritol. That seems to have the highest gastric tolerance among all sweeteners at this point that I'm aware of. And then right next to erythritol is allulose and xylitol for sure. In
Now,
bulking sweeteners.
I did a video a couple years ago where I had got like my first bag of allulose, and I was good, and I found some Kool-Aid packets that didn't have maltodextrin in them. So I was like, okay, I made a video of me making some Kool-Aid out of allulose, and I had a couple of glasses. My stepson and I, we tried some glasses of it, and I'm guessing I found that threshold with allulose because that was rough. That was a rough night. So I mean, I even put a disclaimer in the middle of the video, like, "Hey guys, this was rough." So I mean, yeah, that's a definite good thing. Like, because if you're gonna just basically with something like Kool-Aid, you're basically just mixing it with flavoring and water, and you're gonna find out, well, how's that gonna impact your body? Because I had a lot of allulose at that point, even though it wasn't as sweet as Kool-Aid as I would be used to, because it is a lot less sweet than sugar. And I think you're supposed to put like a cup or 2 cups of sugar for that amount of Kool-Aid, and I think I just put like 1 cup of allulose in it. That's still a good amount of allulose, and that impacted me pretty significantly. So
Yeah, and I can add
yeah.
a little bit to it over here. That if you want to add a sweetener to your drinks, because the drinks basically are, we call them nutrient nukes, because they rapidly digest in your gastric system. So if you're consuming a beverage with low viscosity, like a coffee or any of those kind of things, then you may want to, a lot of the times, you may want to use low weight sweeteners. For example, like if you're okay with artificial ones, then ACE-K or sucralose are great options. If you want something more natural, then stevia and monk fruit extract are great options as well. Allulose, erythritol, xylitol, and all of these really bulking sweeteners are best used in bars or products that have a weight to them, because they also serve as bulking agents, meaning they extend the sort of release of the product as well. So those are the two applications of these two different kinds of sweeteners. And this will drastically reduce the amount of stomach issues you're going to have with any sort of food product. Like that's why you'll notice that whenever you go to a coffee place, and you look at the non-nutritive sweeteners, they always have those sweet and low and all of those kind of things that are basically either sucralose or ACE-K with some amount of maltodextrin in them.
Yeah, and the maltodextrin is typically used as more of a like a bulking agent, almost like a binder, a bulking agent. Because if you just opened the packet and poured out 3 little crystals or whatever, people like, is that it? That's not enough. And and so you're basically just utilizing mostly maltodextrin or dextrose. I know, like the little yellow packets, the whatever that's called. Anyway, that's got like dextrose in it, maltodextrin, and then it's got what the sweetener you're basically think you're using.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's because they are so small, like that's like, because they are so impactful, they have to put something in the way you're pouring nothing into your coffee almost. You know what I mean? Like, at least that's what it seems like to me. And luckily for me, I'm not a sweet coffee person. So that doesn't, I just use heavy cream in my coffee. But um, Danny had a question. He wants to know what stores are you in? And I think you're only in stores right now in the Napa Valley.
Yeah, right now we are primarily just in Napa Valley. We're having a conversation with different distributors. We're starting to scale up slowly and surely. Um, so yeah, online is where most people around the nation can order. Amazon or Shopify, our own Shopify store, which is kgfoodco.com. Um, and then we're trying to build the Amazon, not the Walmart listing as well. So those are the 3 e-commerce platforms that we're working on. And then we are locally in Napa at this point. Our challenge, like I said, is remains the same, is that we want people to understand what our energy pods is. It's a very unique and innovative product in its own essence, in the sense that you have a cup. There's puddings, but it's not really a pudding. So it's a very different product. And it's a hard conversation to have with many stores, trying to explain to them what the product is. But the more we can get the word out about what the product is and people can understand what it is, that's what we're looking for. And that will help us get into more stores and make it more sort of palatable for people. So that's why we've been doing a lot of outreach. That's why we reached out to different influencers and we're telling them, hey, this is what the product is. This is what the use case is. You can use the energy pods for dipping. Literally, you can dip chocolate inside chocolate, or you could use it as a spread. You could use it as, we could refrigerate into like itself and it turns into a bar. You could freeze it and it turns into like this frozen cream sort of product. Refrigeration, of course, is, I think, the best kind of option. So we have a lot of hurdles before we can go into mass market and get into every single store. But we're so happy that we've gotten great feedback and support from people within the keto community. And I think that energy pods and this kind of product is not just like an effort from us, but a group effort from people like yourself, Dustin. Like, people need to know over here that when we go to when we go do demos and stores, we tell everybody that, this is the small energy pod, but we know this guy called Dustin, and he's the reason why you have this big jar in front of you. So that's the recurring story behind CocoZen.
Yeah, because we were like, we need more of it. Now we're gonna need a version of CocoZen that was the like the pecan. I think it was the pecan of a you had a pecan flavor for a while that had like cardamom or something in it, and that was, Chandler loved that one. So you're gonna need to make a big jar of that too. But let me see. Charlie had a question. He says, what contributes to sugar and flour being so cheap as ingredients? And the short answer, I think, on that would be subsidies, government subsidies. They're going to subsidize wheat, corn, sugar. They're going to basically pay farmers to make it and have surpluses, which drives the cost down. Am I correct?
Yeah, and it has a little bit of a history as well. If you look at the agricultural revolution that happened like couple of thousand years ago, combined with sugar's role in economies in the age of the voyages, and then industrial age booms, you start noticing that we were in times of famine during those periods where sugar was a luxury that people wanted to turn into a daily commodity because of its sweetness. It was one of the few things that added uh, sort of like sweetness into their lives, while at the same time providing energy. So that's why it got subsidized to the ground. And at that time, you could even make the argument that that was a good thing because it would keep people from starving and dying. So that's why all of these sugar and flour have been brought down to such a low price. But at the same time, as we're finding out that overconsumption is now a serious problem with these two commodities within our current modern food environment. But luckily, what's interesting to note is that artificial sweeteners and sweeteners came late into the game. They were first conceived, I believe, in the 17th and 18th century, which is also, interestingly enough, I found out recently is that that was the first time that industrially produced toothbrushes also came in. So there's a lot of different moving parts here that have led to the sugar and flour becoming cheap commodities within our modern nations and world as a whole.
And if you ever want to go down a very dark rabbit hole, which I don't understand, I would recommend you not. But the last 3 to 500 years of sugar production, and how sugar made its way into our society the way that it is, that's an unbelievably dark story. Like, devastating type of story. So that I would say check that out at your own risk. But I was extremely surprised at just how devastating the story of sugar cane and all that stuff really was. But um yeah, not to go off on down that rabbit hole at all, but it was one of those things that we talk about the history of it and why it is the way that it is. And I understand, and we kind of even back up, like we don't want to hit a famine type thing. We want to make sure we have a food abundance, but now we're in a situation where we have so much of a food abundance, and I think we've forgotten what humans are supposed to eat like. That we're basically kind of going the other way. We're basically starving ourselves to death while still being grossly obese.
Yep,
So, I mean, we're overweight and starving to death.
nailed it.
And one other question here, because I know you were on a tight timeline today because you have other engagements to get to today. But I just want to say, Charlie asked a question. He goes, "I've always wondered how a tire company, Michelin, gets to have such influence in determining restaurant quality," which is actually kind of a crazy thing because so Michelin, being tires, wanted people to drive. So
Oh
they
man.
started putting out these basically like road atlas type things. And in the road atlases, it showed you how to get places. And when you're out driving, they wanted you to stop and eat food places. So then there was basically along these routes where basically the Michelin. Now, this is obviously a high level, very scaled back explanation for this, but um, they would recommend restaurants all across the United States for driving because they wanted people to drive, because the more you drove, the more wear you put on your tires, then the quicker you were going to need to replace your tires. So then they started recommending restaurants, getting you out to drive. So that's kind of a brief overlook of how Michelin got involved with determining restaurant quality. And I don't know if you have more information you could elaborate on that or not, Fahad, but
There's not much to add that you've already mentioned. It's sort of like um, advanced marketing, as you would sort of say. Like there's a
yeah.
lot of different strategies out there. Like for example, loss leader sort of sales and marketing involves taking something that is super expensive. Like for example, Chevy may not. I'm not sure about this, but somebody mentioned this a long time ago that like their Corvette is supposed to be fully loaded and is not something they profit on, but they bring the customer in to sell them a lower tier Corvette, which they do profit on. So there's like these different ways to sell a certain product, and it's really fascinating how companies are able to do these kind of strategies to make a lot of money. I think the case with Michelin is very similar in that case. It's sort of similar in that way, where you're trying to find something that grabs people's attention or something that is relatable and then sell them on something else.
Right. That's like the similar to what people may understand as Costco. Costco has two huge loss leaders that drive people to go to Costco. They have the rotisserie chicken that they sell for $4.99, which they're losing probably, I don't know how much they're losing, 20-30% per chicken. And then they've got the $1.50 hot dog soda combo. They're losing money on that. That's probably like a $5 or $6 item they're selling for $1.50, because if they raised it, people would be up in arms and they would be kind of where Wendy's is as of like a couple days ago.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Marketing is crazy, man. For example, for us, Cocozen is like barely balancing out at this moment. Our moneymaker is actually Energy Pods, which generates some profit when we do sales. But Cocozen, oh my God, new product. We're learning all the infrastructure of jars and yeah, it's crazy. But we're doing it because we want to help people and enter into the market as well. So you got to do what you got to do.
If you stop making it, Chandler will find you. Because that's one of the problems that we run into with products, because especially in this space, I've done reviews on products. We found products that we started to purchase on a semi-regular basis that just disappear. Like Smart Cakes. She liked, they had these muffins that were like a low carb like muffin, and they just disappeared. They went out of business. There was a a company called Nolita that made cauliflower tater tots, and I was buying those at Walmart. They made it into Walmart's, and they weren't overly expensive. They were like $7 a bag, which is a lot compared to regular tater tots, but I didn't have to put the work in to make them, so I found it cost effective. They just disappeared. They went out of business. We saw what's happened kind of with Perfect Keto. I was an affiliate with Perfect Keto, and they basically ran out of product, couldn't afford to replenish their stocks, and now I'm guessing like their original owner is trying to purchase them back or has purchased them back. This has all been in an email, so I'm not like disclosing any information that nobody has access to, but they've sent out an email to everybody, so this is public information. But I was an affiliate with them, and I had no idea. I had an affiliate a marketing rep that I was working with. She left the company. I got a new representative, and then I heard from him once, and then nothing. And I'm like, I had no idea what was going on until Steve from Serious Keto mentioned something on one of his podcasts or videos. And then we finally got, about 6-8 months later, an email from the company. So it's just crazy how these companies can come and go, and what it takes for these companies to succeed. And that's where, having a conversation with you, Fahad, is so paramount, because it gives us a little bit of an insight on what it takes to kind of go from a concept of you just trying out these things, taking them to yoga studios, to getting products into our hands, shipping them through your own means or through Amazon, trying to get into Walmart, trying to get into Whole Foods, and everything else that you've got coming down the pipeline. Like, it's just, I think it's a very underappreciated thing as far as our community is concerned. We don't truly understand the amount of work, the labor of love that it is for all these products to come to market to meet the demands that we put on things, because we as a community do put heavy demands on products that we want to purchase. We
Yeah.
not only want, a specific type of ingredient, and we also want somewhat specific price point, and meeting that is very difficult. And we see that with companies coming and going quite frequently. So
Yeah. And just sort of to add over here is that um, I know, and I understand there's like a business wall between the customer and the business, but it's always good to sort of assume, like I was saying, assume ignorance before malice. It's a good rule. I learned that from somebody else on a podcast as well. It's like ask questions, ask what's going on before jumping to the guns. I understand we all have the impulse when somebody cuts us off, we're like, oh my God, this is crazy. But if we can incorporate more into our daily lives, that would be a good way to go by it. But you're right. Yeah, it's tough. A lot of businesses in the keto sphere started off, I would imagine, to help people, and uh, they started off perhaps from their, like a lot of businesses do end up starting off from their garages, from their own kitchens. That's how we started, technically speaking. And then eventually we grow into a bigger business. And there's going to be compromises. There's always going to be, it's never going to be a perfect product if you sort of start scrutinizing it into the depths beyond the marketing claims and all of those kind of things. Uh, so, which is good because that gives more room for improvement. But, um, like for example, a certain sweetener, a certain amount of product in a certain thing. Um, Sometimes we get into the realm of diminishing returns, but it's always good to be accepting. I guess that's what I'm trying to point out over here. So, but yeah, always lead with questions, assume ignorance before malice, and try to live a very happy life. Try to focus on people that are close to you and bring you happiness. That's all I gotta say.
And with that, I want to say that Charlie said he appreciates your insights, perspectives. He's never considered a lot of things that you have talked about today, gastric tolerances and such, when it comes to making products. So he says, thank you very much.
Very welcome. I would love to help as many people as possible, and seeing other people happy makes me exceptionally happy.
Now, before I let you go, I know you have other commitments today. Do you have anything that you want to plug? Anything you want to let anybody watching this know?
Yeah, so our website is kgfoodco.com, and you can check out our product there. It's mostly sales, selling our product. We're also on Amazon. You can find Coco Zen Energy Pods over there if you want to make a purchase. Use Dustin's Keto Simple coupon code, and you'll get a discount on your orders from our website. Um, and if you do buy our product, leave us a review. It helps us a lot. That's all I gotta say. And if you guys have any questions, if there's anything that I missed out on and you need more clarification, just email me at fahad@kgfoodco.com. Once again, it's fahad@kgfoodco.com. And I will do my best to answer the question using the best information I can find.
Thank you so much, Fahad, for being here today. Thank you for all of you in the chats. Thank you for all of our supporters, our members, and I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you guys tomorrow on my Sunday morning coffee at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until next time, I love your faces.